Okay. I was waiting on the music to end. Hello, everyone. My name is Brittany Lewis. I'm an artist, author, graphic designer, and tarot deck enthusiast. Welcome to episode 5 of Paint With Me Live, where I sit down every Sunday to work on my dream project, the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. I'm super excited to have you here. I'm really enjoying these live streams. I actually look forward to this time of the week every week. And so I hope you guys have had a great week. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for giving me your afternoon. We're going to have a good time today. So before we get started, I want to send a special shout out to everyone who participated in my birthday sale this past week, where you received 38% off of all canvas prints plus free shipping. I truly, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate you for doing that, because each purchase, for one, makes me do a little happy dance, and then also it helps fund this particular project. So if you missed that sale, no worries. Canvas prints always have free shipping, and there is an image for everyone. There is lots and lots of things to see, to decorate your home, to decorate your office space or your business. And so if you want to check those out, I highly encourage you to visit my website, www.blewisarts.com, and all of those things will be linked in the description for you to check it out and grab yourself a canvas print as well. So before we do get started, I wanted to show you that we still do have some of our journals in stock, and those were the 6 by, I think they're 5.5 by 8.5 inch journals. They're similar to a composition notebook. And to find those, if you're on my website, you would go over to, at the top of the menu, you could click on shop and go straight to books and ebooks. You can also scroll to the bottom, and this works the exact same way on your mobile devices, where you can scroll to the bottom and click on books and ebooks. And there I have 3 of the images from the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. That is the Hermit, the High Priestess, and Judgment as journals. So if you're like me and you love a good journal, be sure to grab those. They're beautiful. I have one here with me just so you guys can see what that looks like in real life, in real time. Now, they do have a satin coated page. That was a very happy accident, and definitely a upgrade that I did not expect. So these are satin coated pages, which makes them great for ballpoint pen use. I love these little journals. They work really well with travel. So like if I'm sitting at the car dealership getting my oil changed or something like that, I usually have one of these with me. So if you like this sort of thing, they are very limited stock. It is something that I usually only offer in in-person events. So I wanted to add them online and offer them to the world, because I know that we have audience members from all over the world. So anyhow, I'm really happy. That's the last little bit of shopping, not gatekeeping, but shopping sort of housekeeping that we have before we get into our Two of Pentacles. The last thing that I want to mention before we get started is that next week we have a very special guest. Now, if you've been watching these live streams with me pretty regularly, then you know that I've encouraged people to sort of come on and talk to me about your dream projects and things like that. So next week we have the pleasure of having a super special guest, Miss Zajay Richardson, who is a singer-songwriter, multi-hyphenate creative, who is also creating a tarot deck project. Not tarot deck, but just a deck project. And so we're going to learn all about what she does. We're going to learn all about her journey, her why. And I'm super excited to have her on. So you do not want to miss that live stream next Sunday. Same place, same time at 3:30 p.m. Central Time, 4:30 p.m. Eastern. And I hope to have you guys with me for that. I'm super excited. She's also the host of Dots in Space Time podcast, which is available on Apple and Spotify. So if you want to learn just a little bit more about Zajay before she comes on and have a chat with us, I highly encourage you to check out her podcast. She's a really awesome human being. So we're going to get into it now. The last podcast, our last episode, we left off on the Two of Pentacles, and we're pretty much just going to pick it back up. Now, I had lots of, I don't know if they were grandiose dreams, but certainly optimistic dreams to have this card finished. But this week, life does what it does, so that's why we set aside this time every Sunday to work on this particular project, because I know if I, again, tell you guys I'm going live, whether you're watching it here live with me or on the replay, then that means that I have to sit down and work on this project. So we're picking right back up. If you see me looking down, I am looking down at my screen display. And this week I kind of want to share with you guys some of the things that I've learned while creating this project, right? So last week we got a little bit into why I chose to do this. We got a little bit into how I got into tarot to begin with, how tarot works, and that kind of thing. And so this week I want to kind of tell you some of the things that I've learned. Now, this project is still in production. We're still creating it here in real time, in real life. So I'm sure by the time that I finish this, I'll have a lot more lessons to add to this list. But for the time being, I would like to really share with you some of the things that I've learned, not only about creating tarot, but about myself. Some of this will be artist specific because I am an artist who is creating a large body of work for publishing. Some of this will be helpful to people who are wanting to hire someone to do a similar project. All of these things I think will be helpful to anyone who is interested in publishing, specifically a deck or a card deck, based on some of the things that I've learned, some of the conversations that I've had with other deck creators. And so, yeah, I think that's how we're going to, that's where we're going to take today's conversation. So before I start, what I just did was I created a new layer so that I can work on the face of our character, and then we'll get right on into it. So early on in this process, I think I've mentioned this before, but if you're new here, we'll recap it. So I started this project late 2019, November to be exact, of 2019. And it was a project that I had been wanting to do for many, many years, right? And so because I had been putting off wanting to do this, I didn't really have a plan when I actually got started, because it was something that I felt if I spent too much time playing, because leading up to this point, I had spent a lot of years wishing and hoping and those kinds of things, hoping that, I could do it and trying to make the time and, all of these different things. So when it became time for me to actually sit down and do the deck, I did not spend a whole lot of time planning this thing out. And so if I were to go back, and if I were to recommend something to someone in terms of before you start, do these things, I would highly recommend you have a sort of, at least an idea of where you want to go with your particular project. Now for me, the ideas came shortly after. It didn't really take a whole lot of time for me to get into, what I wanted to show. And one of the things that I do and have been doing recently is planning out clusters of cards together. But if I were to start this over, I would probably, or not even start this over for the next deck, because I'm sure there's going to be another one, because I would love to have an oracle to go with this. I will probably spend a little bit of time planning out what it is that I want to see. I would spend a little bit of time planning out the overall look, whether that is like a unified color palette or poses and things like that. I don't know how much planning, now I'm saying this, but I don't know how much planning, because I think sometimes we can kind of plan without leaving room for creativity. But I would sort of have a little bit of a direction, a little bit more of a direction into what I would like to do, what I would like to see, what message I would like to see in. Now for me, because this was a dream project and I just kind of jumped in head first, a lot of that came together a lot later. I just knew that I needed to get started and I didn't want to put it off too much longer, right? But if you're starting out and this is something that you want to do, I would highly encourage you to just take a moment, and you don't even have to go into like whole storyboarding or anything like that unless that's something that you want to do. But what I would encourage is just kind of taking a moment saying, okay, this is what I want to do. First of all, are you doing a tarot oracle, or are you doing playing cards? That's probably the easiest thing for you to figure out right off top. And then figure out your card count. You want to figure out your size because that was something that even now looking back at it, it seems very obvious that should be like the first thing that I do is kind of figure out your size. That came probably with before I started the second card. With the first card, I had a proportion rather than I had a size, and then I took a deeper look into my deck collection to see what size card I liked, right? And then from there I decided to format all of my decks to correspond to that particular size. But one of the things that I didn't know or didn't realize at the time was that tarot actually comes in a standard size, right? I think it's 70 by 120 millimeters, something like that, something in that ballpark. And so what happens is when you go to print, if you print anything in a standard size, then you're just printing a standard size. The printers have molds for those standard sizes. There is no additional fees or anything like that. They usually have box templates. They everything is laid out for this particular standard size. But anytime you go outside of that standard size, so if you've ever seen round cards, if you've ever seen little square cards, or wider cards or shorter cards or anything like that within tarot, then there's usually an additional cost on the back end of that to produce that particular card. And the reason is that they actually have to create molds for that deck. So if they're printing and cutting and things like that, there's an additional setup that goes along with a custom size. I did not know that at first. I was just like, hey, I really love Crow Tarot. Now, I don't have any regrets, because I think even if I had known that off top, I probably would have continued in that direction to make a bigger size card. But that is something to keep in mind when you are creating a tarot deck, especially if you're budget conscious. And with capitalism, the idea is to spend less so that you make more. For me, even though that's awesome and important and things like that, the size to me and having a good reading experience was a little bit more important. So that was an expense I did not mind having. So knowing your sizes, having a sort of a theme in mind, can go a long way when it comes to creating this type of project. And I'm experiencing a little bit of lag, so if this is moving a little bit slower than normal, what is a live stream without a few glitches? Like off the top, before I even began the live stream, there were things going on behind the scenes. So if it's a lag, we'll get there. We're going to make the best of this particular Sunday, and we're going to get done what we can get done as best as we can. So another thing that I learned is, and probably pretty obvious to you if you are, just growing and very self-aware, is do not compare yourself, your journey, or anything to anybody else. Okay? I know you guys, I don't have to tell you that, but just in case you hadn't heard it, do not compare yourself. Do not compare your creative process. Do not compare whatever it is that you're doing to the next person, because one, we don't know what it took for that person to get there. And two, your journey is going to be uniquely your own. So how this showed up for me. Now, I have been a tarot deck enthusiast for a very long time, right? And so once I got into the sort of swing of things, and I'm still figuring things out as I go at this point, still figuring things out. I have my size in mind. I'm starting to put out images. The inspiration is coming in this day and the third, and I'm watching other deck creators. Some of them have put out decks that took them maybe 2 years or so. And I remember listening to a podcast with Biddy Tarot where the artist mentioned that it only took her not 2 months. It only took her 6 months, right? And this was the artist who created the Everyday Tarot for Biddy Tarot. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so the decks that I'm really watching are taking about 2 years. This girl says she's taking about 6 years. At this point, I've been a professional artist for a long time. So I know for sure it's not going to take me, it's not going to take me that long, right? And so I went into it with a little bit of overconfidence, and also not really showing myself grace, because I had never done a project of this particular size. I also was still figuring stuff out as I went along, right? I didn't really have a plan or anything like that. I just knew that I wanted to create this deck, and I knew that I had to get started at all costs, no matter what. So I was thinking, well, okay, if it takes people about 2 years to 6 months, I'm going to be a little conservative, and I'm going to say it might take me a couple of years, maybe a year and a half. Needless to say, I was completely wrong. But what that can do, if you're not careful, is that can kind of damper your confidence. If you really are just like, why is it taking me so long? That can really play a part in how you feel about yourself. And what happens is that we don't show ourselves enough grace. Again, we don't know what it took for those people to work at that speed. We don't know what their life is like. We don't know if they have all the time in the world to create their decks. For myself, I am a parent, I am a wife, I am a homeschool mom, right? I own a business, I do all of these different things. So my schedule is set up very differently than someone who may not have the same responsibilities. And so it takes a while, right? It takes me a while. And so again, that's why me having this Sunday set aside to work on my particular deck is so important. And definitely something that I encourage you, if this is if you have a dream project, or if there's something that you want to do, you have to set aside time to do it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So it may take you 5 years, it may take you longer than that. But show yourself grace in that process by, first of all, not comparing yourself to the next person. And that goes for anything. Even if you are a writer, say for instance, let's say you're writing a book, right? And you're watching all of these other writers, right? Independent publishers. You might even be paying attention to people who are being published mainstream. And you're wondering why it's not coming together for you as fast as it may be for the next person. Well, we don't know why it's coming together for that person the way that it is. So show yourself grace. Be patient with the process. And so patience is one of those things that I learned along this journey. I had to be patient, and I had to, be okay with, like, it's going to take as long as it's going to take, so long as we're producing a quality product, and so long as, again, we're being very true and authentic to my experience, so that we're not just putting out something for the sake of putting out something. So don't compare yourself to other creatives. Don't compare yourself to just people outside of yourself. And it's difficult if you've never seen whatever it is that you want to see done within your community, right? So if there's nobody near you who has started a business, or there's no one near you who has made it to this next step, it can be very difficult to sort of stay the course and hold on to the rope, so to speak, and continue to be confident. Which brings me to the next thing that I learned. Motivation is a waning and fickle mistress. Motivation is one of those things that is, from my experience, never a constant thing, right? Change is one of those things that's constant, so you have to kind of ride the wave of change. Motivation is not constant at all. And a lot of that comes from, I don't know, sometimes we just have ebbs and flows of times that we feel very motivated to do something, and then sometimes we don't. So that's why it's super important that if you are doing something, specifically a deck, or whatever it is you're doing, it doesn't have to be a deck or anything, whatever your dream project is, you have to establish before you start your why. Okay? So what does that mean? Your why says, I am doing this because, I want to elevate my financial situation, right? Or I am doing this because I've never seen this done before, and there is a need for this thing in the world, right? That is your why. So if you have a why established, when motivation wanes, that why becomes a very, very important thing to hang on to, because that'll kind of keep you going. So for me, I have times where I have creative blocks, right? So I'll have, and I talked a little bit about this in some live streams before, where I have 4 major arcana cards left to create. That is the sun, the moon, the star, and the chariot. And I have had moments where I've worked on all 4 of those cards, and I'm not able to articulate what I have in mind, or maybe I can't figure out what I want to express in those cards. And so that can be very discouraging if I'm working on 4 cards consecutively and none of those images are coming together. So if I'm, sitting here drawing and I'm like, I don't like how this looks, or, I'm trying to figure out a concept and everything is sort of falling short or hollow, it can be very discouraging if I don't know why it is that I'm creating in the first place. So sometimes rather than sit and fuss and fight with something, it's almost better to take a break and to move on, right? So knowing why keeps me from quitting when things get a little bit rough, because when things get tough, it's very easy to say, well, never mind, I'll go back to what I was doing before because that's easier, it's very familiar, and things like that. So knowing your why when that motivation leaves helps you to kind of stay focused and stay on the target and on the goal. So for me, again, my why is that I'm creating the deck that I wanted to play with when I was 16 years old, and I couldn't find a deck that I could connect to, right? And then later, when I became more engrossed in tarot, I still couldn't find a deck. So I decided, well, why not create what it is that I want to see? That's my why. So anytime I'm feeling discouraged, I'm like, hey girl, if you don't continue this, that thing that you want to see done won't get done, or it'll get done by somebody else, and it still won't be exactly what you want to see. So motivation is very, very fickle. Motivation is one of those things that it's nice when you have it. So right now I'm highly motivated to get this done, which helps because it helps me to continue to create and to do that sort of thing consistently on these Sunday afternoons. And anytime during the week when I can spare the time to work on it, that's awesome. But on the day that I'm like, you know what, I don't really feel like working on this deck, I have to remember all of the people who have been waiting for me to finish this deck for all of these 5 years, right? I have to remember that even though there are tons of new decks coming out, none of them are speaking to me the same way that something that I would create would speak to. The motivation is it's very interesting. It's definitely something that I didn't know was very fickle because again, I had never really spent 5 years working on a single project, right? Most of the projects that I do, whether it is for myself or for my clients, are usually, no more than 6 months at a time, if that long, depending on the size of the project. They're not really long-term investments of time and energy or anything like that. So knowing your why is the best way to combat the lack of motivation that you might have. So if you're just joining me, thank you again for coming in live. This is the Sunday that I spend working on my dream project. And this week we're talking a little bit about some of the things that I've learned along my journey of creating a tarot deck project. And some of that is going to be very specific to being an artist. Some of that is going to be just specific in, working on a dream project. And some of this is going to help you if you're looking to hire somebody for your dream project, right? So a lot of the clients that I work with are working on their dream projects. A lot of them have never hired a professional designer or artist before. And so it's spend a lot of time helping them to navigate that space, which is why I really don't mind sharing some of the things that I've learned along my journey. So one of the other lessons that I've learned sort of as I've started this is how traditional publishing works. Now, very early on, I received a couple of offers to purchase the rights for this deck. And what I appreciate about those experiences is that I was able to get sort of sample contracts from different publishers. And these are like big time publishers to give me a glimpse of what it is to publish a deck through a traditional publisher. And this is very interesting. It's a very great learning experience for a couple of reasons. One, I was like, I ain't gonna lie, it gassed me up. I was like, okay, cool. So very early on, I'm getting interest in this particular project. And I think that that's really awesome. That means that it was a little bit of validation. And I know sometimes that when we say, you shouldn't seek outside validation, that's fine. Maybe confirmation is the right word. Either one, validation or confirmation, I think they both work in this particular situation, because what it did was say, okay, you're onto something, right? Now, what I've learned, in those kind of conversations and just kind of reading through the sample contracts is that, for one, I think ownership is very important. And so, although I am not completely shutting the door on having a traditional published project of some sort. This one will not be traditionally published, because what I've learned is that through these contracts, once you sign over, this is pretty much how it works, right? And if there is a publisher watching this and you guys would like to clear this up, just kind of give some more information for people who may be interested in publishing traditionally, please feel free to leave all the information in the description, in the comments, because I'm sure it will help someone. And I'm by no means an expert in this. This is just what I've learned, right? So when you sign on to have a project traditionally published, I was encouraged you can sell your first bit independently if you want to, but once it goes into traditionally published, they discourage, and this was from a couple of different publishers, they discouraged me to sell that item. They would pay you a advance, right? Whatever that advance is. I saw where the creator of Crow Tarot mentioned this. I think her name is MJ McClellan, something like that, where she spoke a little bit about how it works in terms of you get paid in advance. And she gave the example of $15,000, right? So you're getting paid this advance, and it's not all in one check, right? So you're not getting $15,000 all at once in her particular case, right? But what happens is that you pretty much have to pay that, not pay that back, but you pretty much have to pay that back, right? So you don't see residuals from that until that $15 has been made back, right? And then your residuals are a small percentage of whatever the sales are. Now, in the couple of contracts that I had, that percentage and again, these were sample contracts, right? The advance was not favorable and the percentages were not favorable. So to me, it just kind of pushed the notion of it's okay to have ownership of your own things. But on the flip side, the beautiful thing about going the traditional route is that you only have to make the artwork, right? You only have to make the artwork. If you're writing the book, then the book and the artwork are the only two things that you're responsible for. That traditional publisher takes care of all of the printing. They take care of all of the distribution. They take care of a lot of the advertising, although in some situations you will have to promote your own deck, of course, to drive sales. And so they take care of a lot of the big things, the editing and all of those sorts of things. And so there is an advantage to going that route. But it was very interesting to sort of read through the licensing agreement. And it's what really just kind of got my antennas going was the encouragement not to continue to sell your deck. So that is something to sort of keep in mind if you're going into traditional publishing. On the flip side of that, if you are going to be doing indie publishing of a tarot deck, you are responsible for all of those things that a traditional publisher would take care of. So that means your printing, that means your distribution, that means all of your marketing, that means all of the things that go into making and selling and building your audience. All of that kind of falls on you. Now, what's awesome is that tarot specifically is one of those things that when people really get off into it, they collect decks, which means that there is an audience for everything. It's just a matter of getting in front of that audience, right? Which goes into your marketing. But as an indie tarot deck publisher, you will have to reach out to manufacturers, right? So I've had conversations with manufacturers in China specifically, and I am currently looking for manufacturers within the state because I just feel like it'll be easier to kind of get to if I have to, you know what I mean? Like if I have to get on a one-day flight to wherever to check on the progress of this thing, that it's a little bit easier to do than going to China. However, China is a very popular and viable option, and most of these big publishers are getting their decks published in China. But you have to be able to navigate that space, which means that you have to learn to speak to manufacturers, right? And so early on, and I did this for me very, very early on into this process because I wanted to get an idea of the cost of creating a deck. I wanted to be able to price it right, and I also wanted to sort of get a better understanding of what it takes to put this thing out. So if you're contacting a Chinese manufacturer, for example, there's a certain way that you speak to them, there's a certain way that you format your requests, there are certain abbreviations that you use, and so all of these things were things that I had to learn. For instance, if you are requesting a quote for someone in your subject, you want to use the abbreviations RFQ, that is request for quote. You will put that in the subject of your email, and you will also put the number of decks that you want and what specifically it is that you're asking for. So the number of units and then what it is that you're trying to have done. And then within your email, you're going to ask questions about, you're going to want to get information about the price of their minimum number, right? Your desired number. So even if you want, so usually in this particular case, the minimum is about 500 units, right? So let's say, for instance, for sure that you're going to sell, or you want to buy maybe 2,000 units. You can specify that you want to get a quote for 2,000 units. You want to specify your deck finish. You want to specify your deck count, your card count. You want to specify any sort of add-ons or things like that, such as your gilding and your box style and your book, whether or not your book is going to be black and white or color, whether the cover is going to be black and white and cover. And so you have to take into consideration all of these things before you get into actually printing your deck. And that's sort of one of the things that me and Zajay connected on when we first, had our initial conversation, because she's at a point in her deck where she is ready to print. And so I was like, oh girl, I've learned all of this. Let me share with you what I've learned. And so that was one of the things that we were able to connect on. So you have to have an idea of all of those things. And then beyond that, if you are in the US specifically, there is a customs situation that you have to go through if you're importing something into the US. And this, I'm sure, goes for any other country. If you're importing something, then you have to deal with the customs fees and taxes and things like that, hiring a customs broker. And so there's a whole world of stuff that you kind of have to deal with. Now, it may seem a little bit intimidating. And, certainly there is a lot to keep track of when it comes to putting out a tarot deck project or anything that you're having manufactured overseas. However, this is something that people do every single day, right? So one of the reasons that I'm sharing this with you is because a lot of this stuff I had to sort of learn not the hard way, but like the information wasn't just out there for me to figure out. Now, I was fortunate that I had purchased the course from Benabel Wynn very early on and studied it and sort of worked through some of this, because she was kind enough in her course to actually elaborate so much further on the whole process of having something printed overseas. But just kind of going through that was something that it was a little bit of a learning curve. Even talking to the people, because I had an idea that, just through my own research, that tarot cards had a certain card stock. I later learned through these manufacturers that A, I didn't know what I was talking about, and B, that they use certain phrases and things like that. So all of that was trial and error, but you want to make sure that you are on top of this sort of thing. If this is something that you're interested in, these are just some of the things that you are going to have to take into consideration. So the other part of that is, again, making sure that you're connecting to the right people, right? And so one of the beautiful things about artwork specifically is that there's always an audience for everything. And not even just artwork specifically, just life in general, messages in general, talks in general, interests in general. There's an audience for every single thing, for every single person. It's a matter of being confident enough to share your message, whatever that is, and chances are people are going to find and connect with you on that message. Now, I don't want to say that it's a little bit harder now, because the algorithms and things that we're dealing with in terms of social media is very ad driven. However, don't allow that to stop you from succeeding. Don't allow that to stop you from sharing what it is that you do and sharing your art and your message, because I guarantee you there is someone out there who is going to be able to connect to what it is that you're doing. So if you're watching the screen right now, I've been sort of working through her leotard. I'm just kind of making some broad strokes. I don't really know. I didn't like what I had done, so what I did was just kind of backed it up a little bit. I am doing this on a separate layer. So before I began sort of tinkering with what she had on, I made a copy of my clothes detailed layer. And again, layers are sort of, think of stacks of paper, right? So there's a stack of paper here that I may have made some artwork on, and I don't know if I want to mess with this, right? This is my foundation. So what I will do is I will add onto that a layer that I can paint on top of that will allow me to make as many mistakes as I want to make, and I don't have to affect the layer underneath it. So I did make a copy of that, and I do that quite often in my tarot, not in my tarot, just in my artwork in general, where I'll have 1,000 layers. The main thing is just to label everything so I don't get lost in the sauce. But I did make a duplicate layer of my clothing details, and it's down here labeled clothing details copy. I don't know if you guys can see the writing in the menu here, but I'm just kind of piddling around doing broad strokes, because again, I have a little bit of a lag, so I want to get as much as I can done and kind of work with the lag, right, instead of against it. So yeah, so those are the things that few of the things that I've learned. Now, if you're going into hiring someone to do your, hey Sam. Okay, awesome. Hey Sam. So Sam says, "Oh my gosh," I said, "I'm trying to learn how to use this program. Will you do another live soon?" Yes, I do lives every Sunday at 3:30 p.m. Central. And next week, though, I will be interviewing another deck creator, so it'll be a little bit different setup. But prior to this, we definitely do these every Sunday, because this is the time that I hold myself accountable for working on this dream project. Because all week I spend working and helping and doing things for everybody except myself. But every Sunday, 3:30 p.m. Central, I am here working in this project. So this is Clip Studio Paint, just to give you a rundown of what I'm doing. So I'm working in Clip Studio Paint. This is the program that I do all of my digital illustrations in. I use the Affinity programs, which are graphic design specific programming. There is Affinity Designer, Photo, and Publisher, and all of those things kind of help me put together our final images. So I'm so happy to have you here. And anyone else wants to drop in and say hello, I'm happy to have you guys here. So this week we are talking a little bit about, and I will kind of go over what I'm doing as I'm working it, but we're talking a little bit about some of the things that I've learned in the process of creating a tarot deck. And some of this is going to be very specific to if you're actually like actively creating it yourself. Some of this will be kind of helpful for people who are hiring people to help you sort of fulfill your dream and to create that. So what to look for in that aspect. And then what we just got through talking about was the printing side of it, right? So contacting your manufacturers and having that conversation and being able to do that, because I don't see a lot of people talking about it, quite honestly. And when I, again, first started, Benabel Wynn was the only person that I saw, give that information. And by then she had already published two super successful, hey PL, so two super successful decks. And she was kind enough to do, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with Benabel Wynn. Benabel Wynn is an author. She's also a lawyer, from my understanding. She's also an attorney, but she's successfully published 3 decks. And I wish I had them with me, but I don't. But she successfully published 3 decks. And she actually created a course that goes through the entire process of having conversation with overseas manufacturers to help you sort of print and publish your deck. Also, she talks a little bit about marketing, and she talks a little bit about, planning your cards and things like that. Some of that I had to learn the hard way, just sort of being a creator and allowing myself to make mistakes along the way. And just sort of, enjoying the process. And some of that information, may not apply to certain people, but it was very helpful. So aside from her, up until recently, I haven't really seen anyone speak about the process of creating a tarot deck specifically, or Oracle deck, because I think they're pretty much one and the same, just different sizes and things like that. I have seen in Barnes and Noble, maybe about a month or so ago, someone published a book about it, and I've seen a couple of YouTube videos here and there, but for the most part, I hadn't really seen anyone like really talk about it. So these are some of the things that I've learned. Now, if you're in the process of wanting to hire somebody, so maybe you're not the artist, and you want to hire somebody, or maybe you want to collaborate with somebody on your deck. Maybe you do the artwork and they do the writing, or you do the writing and they do the artwork. There are a couple of things to keep in mind. One, and the very main thing, which is sort of what tripped me up about some of the traditional publishers that I spoke with, and I really didn't have any issues with this with them, but this is something that you should definitely keep in mind if you are hiring someone to work with you, or if you're collaborating with someone, is your copyrights. Okay? Your copyrights. So why is this important? So when you're working with, oh, awesome, Sam, you're an artist. Yeah, heck yeah. Well, Sam, if you want to, one of these days, you can come on and talk with me about it. I know Zajay next week is going to come and talk to us about her process as a singer, songwriter, and a deck creator. So if you would like to share this platform with me, I invite you to do that. Maybe we could talk about some artwork, or maybe you'd be interested in drawing with me as we just talk 90 miles an hour and talk shop and, share some art secrets. But if you are looking to collaborate with somebody, if you're hiring someone like that to do your deck, copyrights is the main thing. So that's important for a number of reasons. It's very similar to the conversation that we often hear about singers or musicians who sell their masters. Okay? For whatever reason, there's a little bit of a hiccup when it comes to visual artists maintaining, and this is illustrators, this is photographers, this is videographers, all of these things. It is very interesting to see the conversation about these types of creatives. Hey, Lee! These types of creatives, maintaining their copyrights versus selling their copyrights. So one of the things that I have been offered a lot of times was to create a tarot deck for somebody or to collaborate with it. For me, it's a little bit tricky because you have to be very careful about those terms, right? So again, selling your copyrights is very similar to a musician selling over their masters. That means that, let's say you're doing someone hires you to create a bunch of images, right? Whether this is a tarot deck or just a collection of images that they'll then use for whatever purpose. If you do not maintain your copyrights, then they can take those images and they can do adaptations. They can do, all kinds of different things. And you will only be paid for that initial sort of concept or that initial body of work, right? And they can then take that and do whatever they want to do, and it goes further, right? So there are two types of contracts. There is a work for hire agreement, which means that you sell all of the rights to all of your things to your whoever's hiring you. And there are pros and cons to that. And then there is a licensing agreement. And then, of course, you can have a hybrid of the two. So within a licensing agreement, you pretty much control how the person purchasing from you or hiring you can use that artwork. So, for example, I recently saw, and it's been several months back, but it was recent, right? Where a person was hired for an $80,000 job where they were doing custom lettering. Now, they were doing custom lettering for, I think, a city, I don't remember which, but they were doing it for them to advertise, tourism within this city, and they did it as a licensing agreement. Now, one of the hiccups that people have is, well, if I hire you to do something, why can't I own the rights to it? In this case, and this is an $80,000 contract. It's a huge contract, right? So she had an $80,000 contract where she had to do a certain number of lettering posters. She specified how long they would be able to use them. She specified in what medium they would be able to use them in. So if it was for print, it would be for print only, whether or not they could use it online and different things like that. And she also specified how, I don't know if I mentioned it because I'm talking 90 miles an hour, but how long, right? And so this was a licensing agreement. And so once this licensing agreement is over with, then they'll no longer have the rights to use that information. When it comes to something like a tarot deck, it's a little bit tricky. It's not even tricky, really, because it's just a matter of mindsets, right? It's the same concept. So if I'm creating a 78 deck project for someone, right? You have to be very conscious about how you benefit after it's done, okay? And so there's nothing wrong with you getting residuals. Like I said, mentioned earlier, working with traditional publishers after they've published and you've done all the artwork and they've created and printed and selling your deck everywhere, you will get residuals because you're basically licensing your artwork to these publishers. The same should apply if someone is hiring you to do this, like an independent creator. I think that there is a little bit of there's not enough information about it. That is something that you should keep in mind. So if you are contacting me, for instance, thank you. Oh, awesome. I have a window over here, so I'm getting the beautiful sun rays. Thanks, Sam. But if you are a creator and you're kind of looking to do something like that, just keep that in mind, right? You don't have to be intimidated to sell all of your rights. And if you do sell all of your rights, it's very fair to charge a premium to do so. Now, for me, I work in both work for hire and licensing agreements, just in the artwork that I create for my clients, right? Sometimes a work for hire is fine. I don't really need to do anything with the artwork or to have any benefits. Logos are a great example of that. If I'm creating a branding package from somebody, I don't need to maintain rights to that. All I have to do, and you have to make sure that this is very clear in your contracts, all I would need to do is be able to showcase that and use it as advertising. As long as that's fine, do what you want to do. Make sure all of that's clear in writing. I've also done licensing agreements, right? So if I am being hired to create a comic book, for example, and there's two different ways I've worked this out, right? Sometimes I'm just redrawing what's already done and I don't really have to have a lot of attachment to that. But if I'm being hired to do something and I'm building everything pretty much from scratch, that goes under a licensing agreement. Hey Lee, so Lee says she would love to connect and collaborate with both me and Sam someday. Absolutely, Lee. I was just telling Sam, I don't know if you were here for that if you want to hop on live one day with me and maybe get some artwork done, we can definitely do that. That might be fun to do, all three of us. Maybe we can draw maybe on a Sunday so I can keep this, so I can keep working on this deck so I can get it done for you guys. But I think that would be awesome, and I do appreciate that. That would be awesome. So yeah, every Sunday we're here. Next Sunday, again, I'll be interviewing Zajay Richardson, who is a singer-songwriter, also a deck creator. So we'll learn all about her. But after that, we'll go back to drawing live. So yeah, any day you want to come on here and draw with me, maybe I get to meet you and you get to meet me a little bit more. And we get to sort of draw and make art and talk shop and have fun. I'm all for that. I think that's really awesome. So Sam asked, how we do that? Very great question. So there is a platform that I use and I'll be using with Zajay next week called Restream. So with Restream, you don't have to have a Restream account or anything like that. All you would have to do is have the link to the Restream. You get on and we talk shop. That's about it. We can share screens and things like that, or we can do it through Zoom. There's different ways we could do it. But if that is something that you guys are really serious about and really want to do, be sure to leave me. I don't know if you can message me on live. I'm not really sure how that works. But if you guys can go to my social media and Instagram, because Facebook I'm not super duper active on, but if you can go on Instagram and just send me a DM, let me know. That would be awesome. I think that would be a great way to sort of collaborate. That would be awesome. Yeah, so Lee says, yay, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Because, I want to give you guys a chance to, first of all, I really want to build a community. So that's one of the other reasons that I do this live every Sunday, is that I want to be able to meet you guys and to spend time with you guys and share a little bit about my process, share a little bit about my thoughts into why I'm creating this project, why I think you should create your dream project. If you're an artist or an upcoming artist, why you should continue to do that and to build on those skills. And so I definitely want to encourage you to do it. So if I can offer my platform, even if it's just a few of us on here talking, that'll be awesome. I would love to meet you. So yeah, make sure you send me a DM on Instagram for sure. And if you guys, I don't know if you guys have my email address or if you're on the newsletter. If you do get the newsletter, you can just hit reply to the newsletters and that'll come directly to my email, so I'll be able to see your replies. But yeah, we can set that up. I think that'll be a lot of fun. So yeah, so these are some of the things that I'm learning and along my journey. So again, Lee, I don't know if you caught it, I am working in Clip Studio Paint, which is the program that I do all of my digital illustrations. And the great thing about Clip Studio Paint, or this particular version, is I'm not even in like the most updated version of Clip Studio Paint, which says that you don't have to be in the best of the best of the best in order to create quality work. You just have to do the work, right? So I'm in Clip Studio Paint version 1, and I am working currently on the 2 of Pentacles. So I'm so excited to have you guys. Oh, okay, so Sam and Lee know each other. Okay, friends. That's awesome. Well, then I'll get to meet you guys, so that'll be awesome. So yes, I would love to see what you all do. I would love to see some more of your artwork. I'd love to see and hear about what your life and what you have going on. I think that's really a great idea. And thank you, Lee, for for mentioning that. I think that'll be awesome. So yeah, we're working on the 2 of Pentacles. Again, this is something that I do every Sunday. And yeah, I hope to see you guys again, and I'm so glad that you were able to catch it with me. And so yeah, so we're pretty much going over some of the things that I've learned just publishing, creating a tarot deck. Now, I've mentioned a lot, and I know that it could probably seem sort of intimidating, right? Don't let it intimidate you. Don't let it intimidate you. If there is, and then it doesn't even have to be a tarot deck. Let's say, for instance, you want to publish your own comic book, or you want to start an animation series. Everyone starts somewhere, right? If I were to go back in time, I would probably plan this out a little bit more. Some of the things that I've sort of learned as I've gone. And this is, I think, card number 32 or something like that of 78. So, and I've been working on this for 5 years. So over the course of this 5 years, I've learned a lot about what would make this easier, sort of how to adapt and make this process a lot easier. And so one of the things that I would do is I would certainly plan it. Thanks, Black Jet too. He says that I should do more. Thank you so much. And so I would definitely plan this out a little bit better. So what I do and how I've adapted to that is I actually plan out 4 cards at a time, right? So if there's all 2s, and right now we're working on the 2s. I just finished up the 2 of Cups, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so we're working on the 2 of Pentacles. But before I even got to that point, I planned out what those 2s would look like. And I'll show you guys. I'll see if it'll come up here for us. Sort of the planning process of planning those tarot cards. And so I encourage you, if there's a big project that you're doing, even if it's a small project, just kind of have an idea of what it is that you want to do. Oh, Lee wants to make a zine. I do too. I actually have an idea for a small, I ain't gonna spoil it, but I do have an idea for a zine. So anyhow, this is how I sort of plan out my tarot deck cards, right? And so because again, I'm sort of dove into this project head first, I, along the way, found ways to make this easier for myself so that I don't get caught into that whirlwind of creator's block as often as I typically do. And so what I did was I sat down and I thought about, how do I want to articulate the 2s of this project? I did the same thing for the pages. I did the same thing for the knights, and I did the same thing for the queens. So basically, I will plan out 4 cards at a time, so that awesome. Lee says she just DM me. Awesome. I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm sorry, but you just DM me, so I'll check that out as soon as I can. All right. So pretty much what I did was I took each of the suits and I figured out keywords for the suits themselves, right? 2s, of course, deal with balance. They all sort of deal with balance. 2 of those 2s deal more so with balance than the other 2s, right? So our Cups and Pentacles have that in common, where they deal a lot more with balance and harmony, whereas our Wands and Swords deal a lot more with decision making and planning and making choices and things like that. So establishing that off the top helped me sort of plan for these images. And so what I did was just little thumbnails, and these are stick figures. And it's always funny when I meet people and they're like, I can't even draw a stick figure. And I'm like, I always start with stick figures, dude. You can certainly draw a stick figure. And so those stick figures later become the basis of my illustrations. So right now we're on the Two of Pentacles, which I had the idea of having this person dance, and I was going to have them on like a briefcase, but I ended up just sort of making that picture as simple as possible because I don't think every card has to be like full visual explosion. This is one of those cards where I kind of pull back a little bit. And I think as creators, sometimes we have 1,001 ideas in our minds, and sometimes we just kind of throw all of that into a single image, when sometimes less is more, right? And this is one of those cases where I had 1,000 different ideas, and which goes along with this particular card, because I was thinking, okay, I want this to be a working mom, and she got her kids and she's balancing this and she's balancing that, and I wanted to illustrate all of those moving parts, when in actuality I figured out a way to when in actuality I didn't have to, and I had to figure out a way to navigate that space without throwing so much into an image so that it's easier to read. So the only two cards in the twos that we have left is we have the Two of Wands and we have the Two of Swords. So once I finish the Two of Pentacles, and after our interview next week on the 18th, that Sunday the 18th, I will actually be beginning painting the Two of Swords. And then I actually need to pose and create the sketch for the Two of Wands. So that one's not quite done. But I do usually do my thumbnails. I do all of my ideas and ideation and things like that ahead of time. And then I'll do my sketches afterwards. And once I have my sketch done, then it's just a matter of painting. So that's how I plan my cards. Now, if I were to go back to the beginning of this, I will probably sit down and plan at least half of the cards, if not all of the cards, prior to actually starting the project. But this was a project that I did that I started again because I had to, and I just could not continue to put it off. Sometimes we let fear drive our decision making, right? So that we might have an idea, let's say you want to start a food truck or something like that, but you don't know anyone who does a food truck, right? Or you've never ran a food truck, or it's a very new experience for you. Sometimes that newness can cause a little bit of analysis paralysis, right? So we're overthinking things and we're afraid to move forward, and we don't know which step to make first or any of that. That first step is always the hardest. And so that's something that I sort of had to overcome at the start of this particular project. I didn't want to overplan it because I didn't want to go through analysis paralysis. Because at this point I had been wanting to do this deck for like 5 years leading up to me actually saying, okay, well, let me just pull a card and see which card I should do first and go from there. But now that I've gotten sort of the confidence, I've gotten sort of started, and the ball is rolling, then I can sit down and say, okay, well, next I'm doing the threes, so let me go ahead and start on my threes and get that thing going. So don't let fear keep you from, and this is my message every week, do not let fear keep you from starting your dream projects. Or whatever it is you want to do. Maybe it's not a project. Maybe you want to travel the world. Maybe you want to move to another country for a few months. Maybe you want to, ask somebody out, Don't let fear sort of stop you from getting that. And because what I found is that as soon as you take that initial step, right, you sort of confront that fear and you sort of do the thing that you're afraid to do, then fear kind of goes away. Now, if you're asking somebody out and they reject it, that's okay. Rejection sometimes is our best protection. But if you're starting a project, if you're wanting to travel, and maybe you say, okay, well, let me check to see how much flights will cost to Costa Rica, or let me see how much accommodations cost, what you'll find that first step makes things so much easier to keep going. So if there's something that you want to do in this life, project, travel, whatever your thing is, don't be afraid to do it, okay? We all have to start somewhere. Now, me again, I had like a whole artistic existential crisis where I was creating artwork I was somewhat happy with, but I did not feel like it just wasn't what I really, really wanted to do, right? And I see this a lot, especially on threads where I have artists or see artists who will mention, well, I want to do this thing, but do you guys like this thing? Or I want to do this, but I don't know if anyone's going to like it. And again, that goes back to your why, right? If you establish why you want to do something, just do it. Don't let anyone else dictate you're doing it. You're moving forward, because we all have our own journey. Nobody can tell you how your journey should go. No one can tell you how your life should play out. You have to kind of take that bull by the horns and do it yourself, right? Okay, so back on the hard work. I done talked y'all's ears off. That's my soapbox. I do that every week. I have to encourage you guys, because sometimes we don't have that encouragement in our lives. Sometimes you don't have someone to tell you to get off your ass and go get it done, right? So this is me, Auntie Brittany. I'm telling you to get off your butt, go get it done. If you want to join me, Lee, and Sam one of these weeks as we draw, and you want to come on and draw and talk and have a good time and just sort of learn about each other and form a community, then you're welcome to join as well. So we've been about an hour. I've talked a good hour. There are more things that I've learned. And again, I'm sort of halfway through the process of creating this tarot deck. And so I know for sure there are going to be plenty more things to do. Probably a book's worth. Maybe that's something that I do later in the future, is kind of write a book about what this journey has been like to be a deck creator, to have a business, and to pivot that business sort of in the middle of having done it. I've been in business now, a freelancer, for about 12 years. Over the last couple of years, I sort of switched the framework of my business from freelance to being a creative entrepreneur. And I think that it's a mindset shift. I think that sort of takes, it makes things a little less personal in terms of like my feelings and things like that aren't as heavily involved. I move according to what's best for my business. But on the flip side of that, and this might be a little bit contradictory, but not quite, you still have to interject and make sure things are in alignment with you as a business owner, right? So it's just working those things out. But switching over into creative entrepreneurship and continuing to switch and to go from being primarily a portrait artist or someone who does logos, because those were the two main projects that I would take, into publishing, because that's something that I do enjoy and something that feels righter, much more right for me than what I had been doing. And so all of those things are scary. I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned a lot about just being a business owner, being a mother, being a wife, just being a person who's trying to figure this out just like the rest of us. And so there's a lot more lessons where these come from. But I think we're going to wrap it up here. Now, before you guys go, don't shut it off yet. Next Sunday, I've mentioned this a few times, but please, I want to see you guys there. Next Sunday, August 11th at 3:30 Central, I will be interviewing Zajay Richardson, who is a singer, who is a songwriter, who is the host of, I think it's Dots in Spacetime podcast. She is also a deck creator, right? So this is someone who's also going through this process of creating something and continues to create, and she's so awesome. And so we'll have a sit down with her to sort of figure out her why and to get her perspective on her journey. So be sure to meet me here next week at 3:30 to see that. I think it's going to be an awesome time. And Lee and Sam, I will get back to you guys as soon as I can. I do appreciate you all, whether you're watching this live or you're watching the replay. If you have questions about anything, make sure you leave those in the comments and check the description, because I have links to all of the journals and odds and ends and merchandise and services and things like that there to find out more about me. But I thank you so much for spending the afternoon with me, and I hope to see you again next week. And until next time, I want you guys to have a happy, creative, and prosperous day. And I thank you again. Until next time, peace.